welcome Anjali Joshi. To you.
Thank you so much, Marco. And I still remember our visit over here, and at night we went for a walk, and we were walking in this grassy area, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why are we walking in this place? And people said, this is the Circus Maximus. So it was a very interesting visit, and I remember it very well. My product managers continued to work with Translated for a long time, and we worked together for a while. And since Translate as well as Translated Toolkit was two of the products that I worked on. So I'd like to take a quick survey of the audience, because my presentation is sort of geared towards startups. So how many startup people here? So a fair number. How many investors here? Okay, just one. Okay. And a lot of people from Translated? Okay. Oh, wonderful. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about product excellence. And one of the things, I've now, this is my third or fourth trip to Italy, and I was in Florence, and what struck me was, as I've been going through the various cities in Italy, is that how much art and sculpture and architecture and science and astronomy and all of that was happening here during that period. And in some sense, I've been in Silicon Valley for a long time, and it feels very much like that, where a lot of people come together and a lot of very smart people are working and learning from each other and doing interesting things, and then going on to do more interesting things because they saw somebody else do something interesting and they got an idea. And it recreates the kind of momentum that you see in Silicon Valley today, and it's just craziness. Somebody does this and somebody does this so much better, and then the money is going here and the money is going there, and then the Medicis and the Ferraras and the Estes and whoever it is that is funding all of these things. So it's very much a parallel, and it's very interesting times. So today's presentation, Marco said, focus on product excellence and product management. So this presentation is in three parts. First, I talk about the product and how you should think about the product. Then the second part, I talk about execution, is how do you build and how do you build efficiently. And then the third part of it, I talk about leadership and what your responsibilities are as a leader at these startups. And I assume I have a lot of founders and CEOs, new CEOs and so on. So please feel free to interrupt as and when you want to ask a question. It's not a canned presentation. It was done at a time when I had lost my voice, so there's a lot of text on the presentation, and I will leave it with you should you want it. And so let's start. So, other way? Okay, so the first thing about a product, and you have a lot of founders here, so I don't want to go into too much, but you must have a clear value proposition. And a lot of times you start because you have a pain point. But remember, you're not the user. I mean, your pain point may not be shared by a lot of people. So you have to start with a clear understanding of the problem and use case that you're solving. And it should have a clear benefit to a very large number of users. It's not just like, I don't like this, so I'm going to fix it, and you can fix it for yourself. And the one lesson I learned at Google is that you are not the user. So even though it may seem like a very, big problem to you, it sometimes is not a big problem for many people, and you have to be very careful about that. So I don't want to dwell too much on this, but it's really important to have a clear value proposition. I'll give you a big example of this. Was one of the founders, one of the leaders of the ads, Google Ads, decided to start a new company because he didn't like the direction that ads was going in. And he said a lot of people would like to do search on a subscription without advertising. And that company went nowhere because he very quickly learned, and his team learned, that people don't really care to see the ads. They can ignore them, because if the free service is great, then they just ignore that. So he didn't gain very much traction in the market. So I wanted to say that, you may not like it, but that doesn't mean that the market will accept it. Users and customers. So this is something that I want to drill into everybody's head, that you have to keep thinking of the user, who's using your product, who's the customer for your product, and keep observing them and learning from them and see how they are using your product, and then stay very close to them as you evolve your products. You have to be always, as I say, in the shoes of the user, and you have to think about it in their perspective. And sometimes what happens is you think this feature is going to be very, very useful, and you launch it and nobody uses it. And that's not and oftentimes, it used to happen to me, and do some user testing and find nobody even sees the feature, let alone use it. It's my problem. It's not the user's problem. I'm like, why don't they see this? But they don't see it because it's not something that they thought was a problem in the first place. So be very careful with this, because a lot of times people propose features and say, oh, it seems like really great and so on, and then nobody uses it. Okay, so this is crafting, and I really strongly believe in crafting, and I have a bias to create very beautiful and intuitive products, and that should feel natural to you, and you should use them now. People should be able to use them, either enterprise products or consumer products, and you should always make it very intuitive and accessible, so people don't have to read manuals, or people don't have to dig through several layers of drop-down menus to find whatever it is that they want to do. And the other thing has been a learning lesson for me is that a lot of people say, add this feature or add that feature. You have to think very carefully before you add a feature. And in many companies, as they grow big, what happens is product managers want to launch something. So they will launch something because they want to launch something. And that feature may or may not be useful. And sometimes what happens is, as you know only too well, in many Google products today, in many Microsoft products, there are so many features that just get in your way, and you're just annoyed at them because there are just too many features in a product. So there seems to be, at least my learning has been, is there seems to be a good point to stop and not continually add features. And stop and wait for some time, and then see how the product evolves in the market before you constantly try and add small features. This is again very, very, has been very important to me. People, especially being at Google for such a long time. I mean, lots and lots of cool technology, and you talk about the transformer, right? Google, all these engineers, they wrote the seminal transformer paper, and it was AI first and this and that. And guess what happens? I mean, Marco builds a product that uses it. ChatGPT comes along, and the Google technology was much better. It was much further along, but people didn't know that it even existed, or what was AI and how it was being used in products and so on. So I think build technology, but make sure you're thinking about the applications as well, because innovation is only as good as its reach. And you can keep innovating, but if people aren't able to use that innovation in a product, then you end up, people stealing the limelight from you. Okay, this is another one for startups. A lot of you can get into a situation where you're thinking very short term, and you don't you keep pivoting and you keep changing your ideas. But in this case, what you should do is you should have a vision, focus on the long term, but then break down that vision into achievable steps, and work on them in phases. You shouldn't lose sight of the big picture at all times. That should always be in the back of your mind. But in terms of your execution, you should always have short-term goals, and that also gives wins for the developers, for the product people, for everybody to say, hey, we've accomplished something. Otherwise, if you have a vision, and one good example of that is the Google self-driving car. And that project has been going on for 15 years now, and it has turned around many, many leaders and many product managers and many people. But you will eventually get to the product, but there doesn't seem like an end in sight. Whereas when you look at what Tesla has done, it's much faster. It's in the market. It's doing its thing and so on. So that's kind of what I believe in. There are some people who believe that you should just aim for the long term and go for the long term, however long it takes. But sort of you lose energy and momentum. Another sort of these are really basics, but honestly, you should keep these basics in mind. Measure, measure, measure constantly. What is being used, how is it being used, is it not being used? Do user studies to understand how people are using their products. Sometimes you find you put something out in the market and you thought it was going to be one use, and they're using it in a completely different way, and you didn't even realize that. But that also happens. And in this day of I would say AI in particular, people are finding all these uses that are not the best. And people are coming up with, we should develop policy and regulation. But a lot of us don't even know how the technology is going to be used. I'll give you an example from Translate. So we were very excited and we said, well, Translate is such a great product. We should launch the Translate API. And we did that. And we got massive, massive traffic on the Translate API. So by all numbers, it looks fantastic, right? The product is doing really well. But the use was people were taking existing content, translating it into like 50 odd languages, and then putting Google ads on them. So it was bad content being put on the web, and so we had to put a stop to that. But by all metrics, the product was doing really well, but it was actually a very bad use. So you have to get both qualitative as well as quantitative signals to understand, exactly what is going on with your product. Okay, and then how do you plan? How do you set your goals? And you have to, you want to execute, but how do you do an organized execution? And so you set up your OKRs, and these should be like a few goals that you want to do. And you want to make sure that you don't have too many resources as a startup. So you want to make sure that you don't have like 20 objectives and key results that nobody's it's not planned, it's disorganized, and no one is really achieving anything. It's like big Brownian motion. Everybody thinks they're doing something and running around, but nothing is moving towards an objective. So you want very clear objectives for the company, for the project, and just a few of them. And then you need to be, of course, these types of key results are different by different group. For engineers is different, and product is different, and sales is different, and so on. But everyone needs to have objectives and set clear quantitative targets. Don't say, improve this, and that's it, right? You need to say that a feature should be used so many times per month, or daily active users, or anything which is a quantitative measure of how you're actually doing. And be ambitious when you set these objectives. I mean, you may not make them, but be very clear and be very ambitious that you will be able to achieve a fair percentage of them. Okay. Any questions here? I'm just giving you a lot of basics, but these have been like lessons that are, I carry in the back of my head. It's not like, so when you're designing a product, this is the how of it rather than the what. So, yes.
Let's talk about having a clear value proposition. In some cases, maybe you have done some discovery and you have a deep understanding of the problem, and maybe sometimes you just get an idea and you come up with a value proposition that, as you said, it's your own pain point. In your experience, what is or what strategies have you adopted in the past to, let's say, in this second scenario, how to then validate that value proposition is of any value to anybody else other than yourself?
Yeah, so I mean that's a really good question. I think of it as a hypothesis, which is that I believe this, but I don't know that it's proved. And so how can I put it together, and how can I test it with the least amount of resources and in the shortest amount of time? And so you do what you do is an experiment. So you don't really make it a production feature, but you launch it as an experiment over a certain number of people, and then you see how that feature has acceptance or use or something. But that's what you would call what I would call an experiment, and I would definitely try it. I mean, you wouldn't want to spend the whole company directed towards it, but you have multiple of these experiments going on, because some will work and some won't work. But without spending too much time or resources into it, build it and put it out there for people to use, and you will get feedback right away on whether it's useful or not.
it's possible to evaluate business viability? So let's say we check the value, check the visibility. Do you have any suggestion about the business part, even if we are doing experiments?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question because, a lot of people launch products for free, and when they say, oh, you have to pay for them, all your customers evaporate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they go away, and suddenly you find that you have no customers left. And I think that that's a really important thing. And you can ask them, will you pay for it? And they say yes, but when you make them pay for it, they go away. So that's. I mean, there are lots of people who try lots of different things, but the first thing I have found is that you get people to use it. Get people to use some version of it so that it becomes a habit for them. And once it becomes a habit for them, then taking it away is a big problem. And even small features like calendar, so on. It's like, why would I use it? I can do this myself. But when you use it and say it takes a lot of trouble away from you, then you say, okay, it's only $10 a month or whatever it is, I'm just going to pay for it. So I kind of feel like these freemium cases, when the value proposition is actually meaningful, that those convert. If you have something that is just a nice to have, then a lot of times it may not convert. So how do you ensure that you're... I just lost this? No, it's back. How that is actually sufficient that people will feel the pain point if it goes away. And that's always like, if I take it away, will you miss it?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so execution. And this is kind of a short section. So let's talk about, so you've got your company, you've got your goals, you've got your culture document, you've got how people will do things, how they will talk to each other, all of that. And all that is actually wonderful. But in the end, you've got to build your product, right? So how do you do that? And once you've set your company goals, then you ask all your team leads to take those goals and then break them down into what would be the goals for their own teams. And there's always some negotiation. You've got the product people want to do some feature, and the engineers say this is going to take 15 engineers, and then you don't have 15 engineers, and so there's a lot of back and forth and so on that goes on. But just make sure that everybody's aligned and they are working towards the same goals as you have set for the company. Okay, so now focus and prioritization. I talked about negotiation of resources, and what you'll find when you do this, and you should get quite precise about this. This is not like, at least in the early days, I remember, you know exactly how many people are working on which project, and especially if you're at a startup, you need to know that because you want to make sure that whatever resources you have are the most productive. And so you'll have to move things around, and so flexibility is important. And one of the components of a good culture is that people should also be flexible, and they shouldn't be fixed, and I'm going to do this and nothing else, and then it becomes difficult. So make sure that your resources are aligned with your priorities and your focus. Okay, this one is very, very important, is accountability and ownership. And I strongly believe in accountability. When you sign up for something, then you are accountable for it. So no finger pointing, I didn't do this because this, that, or the other happened. That sets a very bad tone in the company. I mean, you're all achieving a goal, and so you need to kind of, if there's something not working or not going wrong, you need to have a conversation about it rather than, do finger pointing when things don't work out. And you need to give people clean and clear ownership of those areas. So one of the worst things that happens is you get assigned a project, but all the people are reporting to somebody else, and that somebody else assigns them something else, and then you suddenly find that you don't have the right people working on your project, and then you can't do anything, and it's just not a healthy situation. So keep things always very clear, keep accountability to the people, and hold them responsible. And so the other thing that I often see happening is that people don't want to talk about problems because it makes them look bad. But, you must share your problem because that's what your managers are here for. That's what your CEO is here for. They are here to solve problems for you. So if you don't share your problems with them and then you fail and you say, well, it didn't happen because of this, that, and the other, then that's not a good thing. So always be clear, transparent. If you have issues, realize that you're all focused on the objective rather than, your own advancement or whatever, because that will happen as you build good products. But make sure that that you're surfacing problems as they come up. Keep everything out in the open. Unless there is confidential information, people should see what other people are doing. We're here building, working towards a common goal and objective. There's no need to hide anything. So the more that people know about what other people are doing, and more that they know how they are focused, then you can actually find the right people, get the right help. All of that really helps, especially when you're starting up. It's just not a good thing to have projects that are like not sharing enough information. Okay, where did we go? Okay. And keep a grading system. Is like, how much have you done? So you set your goals, you've got your teams organized, you've got them resourced, but then how did they do? So keep an eye on how they are doing and how productive they are. Set very ambitious goals, but you don't have to be punishing that you give everybody a C or something like that. But on the other hand, you should also know that sometimes projects are harder than they seemed at the outset, and it's okay to fail. That's the other piece I always have emphasized. That it's fine if you fail. Just tell me why and how and what lessons you learned. And because you think you anticipate something that you would get it done in 4 weeks, and it doesn't happen in 8 weeks for multiple reasons, and then it's fine. You have to accept failure as well as part of the process. And then if you punish people for failure, then what happens is they are discouraged. They don't tell you when things are going wrong, and you don't want that. Okay, so I think we got, again, a lot of the learning lessons for me as to how to operate well. And these are, of course, very contextual, and they will apply differently in different situations, but just keep these things in mind as you are working your job day to day. So leadership. So this is always hire people who are smarter than you. Always work with people who are smarter than you, because that makes you better. It makes the product better. It makes the work a lot more fun and challenging and interesting, and it keeps you learning. So how do you build your team? First of all, hire smart people. Hire smart, resourceful, independent people who may sort of seem to you not the most compliant, but they are often the people who will solve the hard problems for you. They will work outside the line, and if you support them, you will earn their loyalty forever. Also hire people who are different than you. A lot of people say, oh, I really like this person because they think exactly like me. But what diversity brings is diversity of thought, which is you see a problem one way, but then other people may see it in a different way, and that leads to a much better solution rather than you getting into a groupthink situation. So that's very, very important too. And diversity, I don't mean diversity in the sense of, what diversity is meant these days, just this kind of people or that kind of people. It really, you want diversity of thought. You want, designers, you want creatives, you want people who play the piano, you want people who sail the world, you want all kinds of people who are on your team. And again, this is again the same thing, is give them ownership. People, when they own a product, they tend to kind of feel more responsible, more accountable, more energized to achieve their goals. And let them innovate. I want to talk about a few experiments that I've done with innovation over here, which is, people come to you with ideas and they say, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, but you have this other project that needs to be finished. Sometimes setting up a process for getting small teams together and giving them 6 months and say, hey, try this thing and then we'll see how it goes. That ends up being not only a huge motivator, it also ends up surfacing a lot of ideas. So that's something that I would encourage. And there are other models that people use for surfacing like ground up innovation, but that's something that's really important to have, whether you do 20% time or you do 6-month internships or something like that. And that tends to be a very big motivator to people. Encourage creativity and problem solving at all times. This is super important, especially now that AI is doing all of the toil, people are not coding anymore, a question that people ask me, so what do you think the new product manager is going to look like? And right now, in the last 10 years, what had happened is that product managers was mostly focused on frameworks, agile and this and that, and, whatever, JT jobs to be done, and so on and so forth. But I think the most critical component for product managers going forward is going to be creativity. It's going to be people who are the out-of-the-box thinkers, people who can, connect different domains, people who can, imagine what could be done with technology, because technology is moving so rapidly and is just flying in front of our eyes. And so the people who are able to see solutions are going to be the ones who are going to be the most effective product managers. And, okay, so this one is for all of you who are founders and CEOs. Decision making. In a startup, it's very easy to kind of just let things happen. And in some sense, the complexity that Google finds itself in right now is because of that, the whole consensus-based decision making and not, clarity on closure and so on. And I'm sure all of that will sort itself out. But you have to be comfortable with making decisions with incomplete information. And encourage other people to do the same as well. Sometimes it's a good decision, sometimes it's not so good a decision, but that's okay. Because, the way you train people is if they make bad decisions, then they learn from them. If you are constantly expecting them only to make the good decisions, then, and punish them, then people become risk averse, and that's not a good situation. In terms of trying things out, better to get it right most of the time than to wait to get the data to get it right all the time. So 80% solutions, you think it's looking good, go ahead and do it. Because one thing is, with software, you can always pull back and change and so on. So that enables you to do that. And the other thing is, if it fails, acknowledge the failure. And I almost sometimes say celebrate failures, because at Google, people used to say, you fail a lot. And I said, I fail a lot because I try a lot. And and if I waited to do everything that was always a success, then I would do very little. So you should encourage, it's okay to fail because you tried and things didn't work out, and what did you learn? And the next time you do it, you will not make the same mistake, and you will also do better. Okay, trust. Trust is, as part of culture, is a very, very big thing. And again, as I repeat, risk-taking and exploration, encouraging people to share ideas, an environment where people feel comfortable to speak out, and an environment which is egalitarian, where there isn't hierarchy, where people are comfortable. That's when they do their best work. And so you need to create what I call safety, so they know that somebody has their back. If they say something, they're not going to be punished. If they do something off it, then that people need to feel secure before they can work at their best. So you have to create a situation of trust, but the best people will do their best work when they know that they are safe and secure. And really, that's all I have. And what I wanted to do today is, because you're working on so many different projects, I didn't want to go into the details of, this technology or that technology and what's going to work, what's not. But some of these are like principles that I have learned to operate from. And then you take these and you apply it to your situation, whether you're working on, how to apply LLMs to translate and what's going to happen to the industry, or the many other projects that you're doing. This is more of a philosophy of operation rather than a specific tactical, how should I do this? And we can talk about that. So with this, I will open it up to questions. Thank you.